Have you ever wondered if the smallest things can change your life forever? For Richard Hartmann, a successful businessman with everything money could buy, it was a simple glance at a little girl's necklace on a cold winter morning. That single moment would unravel secrets buried for 12 years and reunite a family torn apart by tragedy and deception. The silver heart-shaped locket hanging from a thin chain around the neck of a poor girl begging outside his favorite coffee shop looked exactly like the one he had custom-made for his daughter Emma's 5th birthday, the same daughter who had disappeared without a trace during what should have been a routine weekend with her mother. Richard's hands trembled as he approached the young girl sitting on the sidewalk with a small paper cup in front of her. The December wind cut through his expensive coat, but he barely noticed the cold. His eyes remained fixed on the silver heart dangling from her neck, the unique engraving on its surface catching the morning light exactly as he remembered. The girl couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, with tangled brown hair and worn-out clothes that had clearly seen better days. When their eyes met, Richard felt his heart skip a beat. Those eyes, they were unmistakably familiar, the same unusual shade of amber that had always reminded him of autumn leaves. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "may I ask where you got that necklace?" The girl instinctively grabbed the pendant, clutching it protectively against her chest as she eyed the well-dressed stranger with suspicion. "It's mine," she replied defensively. "My mother gave it to me. She said it's the only thing I have from my real father." Those words hit Richard like a physical blow, and he had to steady himself against the brick wall of the building. Could it really be possible after all these years? His ex-wife Patricia had taken Emma for the weekend, and on Sunday evening she called hysterically claiming that Emma had vanished from the playground while she'd been momentarily distracted. What followed were months of desperate searching, police investigations, and national media coverage, but Emma had simply disappeared without a trace. Patricia had moved away shortly after, unable to bear the memories, while Richard threw himself into his work, building his small company into a multi-million-dollar empire to distract himself from the hollow emptiness that consumed his life. He had never remarried, never had other children. The wound of losing Emma remained fresh even after 12 long years of unanswered questions. As he looked at this girl with the familiar necklace, Richard wondered if fate had finally decided to be kind. "I don't mean to frighten you," Richard said gently, crouching down despite his expensive suit touching the dirty sidewalk. "My name is Richard Hartmann. I had a daughter who wore a necklace exactly like that one. She disappeared 12 years ago." He pulled out his wallet with shaking hands and revealed a worn photograph he always kept with him, a smiling 5-year-old girl with amber eyes, holding up her new necklace proudly for the camera. Her name was Emma. The girl's eyes widened as she looked from the photograph to Richard's face, noticing for the first time how her own eyes mirrored his. Something stirred in her memory, flashes of a man's laughter, being tossed in the air, the feeling of complete safety that had disappeared so long ago. "My mom always told me my father died before I was born," she whispered, confusion written across her face. "She said his name was David." Richard felt his knees weaken as he processed what this might mean. If this girl was indeed his Emma, then Patricia had orchestrated the most unimaginable betrayal, faking their daughter's kidnapping and disappearing to start a new life under different identities. But why? They had shared custody after the divorce, and he had never missed a single child support payment. What could possibly drive someone to inflict such pain? "What's your name?" he asked, his voice cracking with emotion. The girl hesitated before answering. "Lily. Lily Davis." She studied his face carefully, searching for any hint of recognition, any connection to the vague dreams and memories that had always felt more real than her mother's inconsistent stories about her past. Something about this stranger felt inexplicably familiar, the way he tilted his head when he spoke, the gentle crease between his eyebrows. The silver locket suddenly felt heavy against her skin, as if it carried the weight of a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Nearby pedestrians glanced curiously at the unusual scene, a wealthy man in a designer suit kneeling before a homeless girl. But neither Richard nor Lily noticed the stares. They were lost in a moment that transcended the bustling city around them. In that frozen instant, 12 years of separation hung in the balance. Would this chance encounter heal old wounds or simply create new ones? Richard fought the urge to embrace her immediately, reminding himself that to Lily, he was still a stranger, regardless of what his heart was telling him. "Lily, would you tell me about your mother? Where is she now?" Richard tried to keep his voice steady, not wanting to overwhelm her with the storm of emotions raging inside him. Lily's shoulders slumped slightly as she answered, She died 3 months ago. Cancer. That's why I'm out here. The foster family they placed me with doesn't really care, and I need money for food sometimes." Richard's heart broke for the hardships this girl had endured, whether she was his daughter or not. No child should be begging on the streets in the bitter cold, especially not one who might be his own flesh and blood. "I know this will sound strange," he said carefully, "but would you consider taking a DNA test? If you are who I think you might be." He couldn't finish the sentence as his voice caught in his throat. The possibility was too overwhelming, too precious to articulate fully. Lily's instinct was to run. She'd learned to be wary of strangers making unusual requests, especially men in expensive suits. But something in Richard's eyes held her in place, a profound sadness and hope that mirrored her own longing for belonging. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, but there was more curiosity than accusation in her tone. She'd spent years wondering about her true origins, especially in the quiet moments when her mother refused to talk about the past. Richard took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "You don't have to trust me right away. We can meet somewhere public, bring someone you feel safe with. I can show you more photos, tell you stories only Emma's father would know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "This is me. You can look me up, verify everything I've told you." Lily took the card tentatively, running her thumb over the embossed logo of Hartman Industries. Her mother had always been paranoid about being found, constantly looking over her shoulder. Could this be what she had feared all along? The truth finding its way back to them despite all her efforts to bury it? "There's a cafe across the street," Lily said finally. "We could talk there. I have questions too." Richard nodded, relief washing over him. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. As they stood up together, he noticed how Lily unconsciously mirrored his posture, another small detail that made his heart race with possibility. Could this really be happening? How many nights had he dreamed of finding Emma, only to wake up to the crushing reality of her absence? Now, in the most unexpected way, that dream might actually be coming true. But Richard tempered his hope with caution. There had been false leads before, moments of cruel optimism that had nearly broken him. In the warm cafe, over steaming cups of hot chocolate, they began piecing together their fragmented past. Lily spoke of growing up with a mother who jumped at shadows, who moved them from city to city at the slightest sense of being recognized. "She was always scared," Lily explained, warming her hands around the mug. "I thought it was just her being paranoid, especially in the last few years when she got sicker. But maybe she was running from you all along." Richard listened intently, cataloging every detail that aligned with what he knew about Patricia's deteriorating mental state after their divorce. The doctors had diagnosed her with paranoid tendencies, but no one had imagined she would go this far. You were born on April 18th, Richard said softly. "You had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your right shoulder blade. Your first word was star, because we used to look at the night sky together from the rooftop garden of our old house." Lily's eyes widened. "My birthday is April 18th, she whispered. Then, hesitantly, she pulled the collar of her shirt aside slightly to reveal her shoulder. "And I do have a birthmark. Mom always said it looked like a banana." The faint attempt at humor couldn't mask the trembling in her voice. The coincidences were becoming too numerous to dismiss, each one adding another piece to the puzzle of her identity. Richard couldn't help but smile at her joke despite the overwhelming emotions. That quick wit reminded him so much of Emma. "You always had a way of making people laugh, even as a little girl," he said softly. "You used to put on puppet shows with your stuffed animals for anyone who would watch. Your favorite was Captain Trunk, a blue elephant with one ear slightly bigger than the other." Lily's spoon clattered against her mug. "I had that elephant until we left it behind during one of our moves when I was about 8. I cried for weeks." She shook her head in disbelief, struggling to reconcile these shared memories with the story of her life she had always been told. How could this stranger know such intimate details unless he was telling the truth? The next day found them sitting nervously in a private medical clinic, waiting for results that would usually take weeks but were expedited with the influence Richard's wealth could command. Lily had agreed after Richard showed her more family photos on his phone, images of a lake house that triggered vivid memories she couldn't explain, a stuffed elephant that looked exactly like the one she'd treasured until it disappeared during one of their many moves. The test itself had been quick. a simple cheek swab for each of them, but the waiting felt eternal, pregnant with possibility and fear in equal measure. They sat in uncomfortable silence, both afraid to hope too much in case reality proved cruel once again. While they waited, Richard learned about Lily's life, how they had moved frequently, rarely staying in one place longer than a year. How her mother Patricia, who had changed her name to Pauline Davis, had been loving but paranoid, always looking over her shoulder. How Lily had excelled in school despite the instability, finding refuge in books and learning. He shared stories of Emma, her obsession with space and stars, her infectious laugh, the way she insisted on wearing mismatched socks for good luck. With each exchanged memory, the invisible thread connecting them seemed to strengthen, drawing them closer to a truth that both longed for and feared. Would science confirm what their hearts already suspected? What if the test is negative? Lily asked suddenly, voicing the fear that had been growing inside her. What if all these coincidences don't mean anything? The possibility hurt more than she expected, the idea of losing this potential father before she'd even had a chance to truly know him. Richard considered her question carefully. Then we'll both have answers, even if they're not the ones we're hoping for, he replied honestly. But Lily, regardless of what that paper says, I want you to know that I'd like to help you. No one should be living on the streets, especially not someone as bright and resilient as you. His sincerity touched her deeply. This wasn't just about finding his long-lost daughter, it was about basic human compassion. When the doctor finally entered with an envelope in hand, the room fell silent. The results are conclusive, he announced solemnly. The probability of paternity is 99.9998%. Richard let out a sob that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul, a sound of both profound grief for the years lost and overwhelming joy for what had been found. Lily sat perfectly still, tears streaming silently down her face as pieces of her fragmented identity suddenly aligned. I remember the elephant, she whispered. His name was Captain Trunk. And I remember you reading me stories about stars. You did different voices for all the characters. The memories were returning now, flooding back like water through a broken dam. You called me your little astronaut. Richard nodded, unable to speak through his tears as he tentatively opened his arms, giving her the choice to accept or reject the embrace. After a moment's hesitation, Lily leaned forward into her father's arms for the first time in 12 years. The embrace was awkward at first, both of them too conscious of the years and secrets that separated them, but gradually they relaxed into it, feeling the undeniable connection of blood and shared history. For Richard, it was the moment he had prayed for through countless sleepless nights. For Lily, it was the beginning of understanding who she truly was. The silver locket that had brought them together rested between them, a small trinket that had somehow preserved their bond across time and distance. In the weeks that followed, they began the delicate process of rebuilding what had been so cruelly taken from them. Richard helped Lily move into his home, her home, and hired therapists to help them both navigate the complex emotions of their reunion. Together they pieced together what had happened. After the divorce, Patricia had grown increasingly unstable, convinced that Richard would eventually seek full custody due to her mental health struggles. In a desperate, delusional act, she had staged Emma's disappearance and fled across the country, changing their identities and cutting all ties to their previous life. What she had intended as protection had instead caused immeasurable pain to both father and daughter. Lily struggled with conflicting emotions about her mother, anger at the deception, yet understanding of the mental illness that had driven her actions, and grief for the woman who had, despite everything, raised and loved her. Richard focused only on the miracle of having his daughter back, refusing to let bitterness poison their fresh start. Your mother was sick, he told Lily gently when she expressed guilt over feeling angry at Patricia. What she did was wrong, but she loved you in her own way. We don't have to erase that love to build something new. This compassion surprised Lily. She had expected him to vilify her mother after everything that had happened. Instead, his understanding gave her permission to hold both truths, that her mother had loved her and that her actions had been deeply harmful. The adjustment wasn't easy for either of them. Richard had to learn how to parent a teenager rather than the 5-year-old from his memories, to give Lily space while still offering the stability she had never known. Lily had to navigate her new identity, reconciling Emma with Lily, and finding her place in a world of privilege after years of scraping by. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, and occasional tension as they figured out how to be father and daughter after such a long separation. Yet underlying every interaction was a profound gratitude for the miracle that had brought them together against impossible odds. The silver locket remained Lily's most treasured possession, now a symbol not of loss, but of an unbreakable connection that had defied time and distance. As spring arrived, Richard and Lily sat together on the terrace of their penthouse apartment, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. The silver locket still hung around Lily's neck, but now it represented not just her past but also her future. They had decided together that she would keep the name she had grown up with. Lily was who she had become during those missing years, though she had added Hartmann as her surname, embracing both parts of her identity. "Do you think things happen for a reason?" Lily asked thoughtfully, twirling the locket between her fingers. "Sometimes I wonder if Mom knew that one day this would lead me back to you." Even in her worst moments, there was always something sad in her eyes when she looked at this necklace. Richard considered this possibility, that somewhere deep down, Patricia had preserved this connection, either out of unconscious guilt or a flicker of rationality in her troubled mind. "I believe life gives us second chances when we need them most," he replied, thinking of how close they had come to never finding each other. If he had chosen a different coffee shop that morning, if Lily had decided to beg on another street, if the locket had been lost or sold during their years of financial struggle, so many small decisions had aligned perfectly to bring them to this moment. What had begun with a chance glimpse of a silver heart had healed wounds that both had believed would pain them forever. The universe had conspired to reunite them, using the very necklace that symbolized their bond as the key to unlock their shared future. "I used to dream about finding you," Richard confessed, his voice soft with emotion. "In the first few years, those dreams gave me hope. But as time passed, they became painful, reminders of what I thought I'd never have again." He reached out to take his daughter's hand, still marveling at the miracle of her presence. "Now I'm afraid to fall asleep, worried that I'll wake up and discover this was all just another dream." Lily squeezed his hand reassuringly. "I'm not going anywhere, Dad," she said, the words still new and precious on her tongue. "We have a lot of time to make up for." Her resilience amazed him, how she could face this enormous shift in her understanding of herself with such grace and strength. In many ways, she was stronger than he was, having learned to adapt to change from such a young age. Their story spread quickly throughout the city and beyond. Newspapers, television reports, and social media all captivated by the miraculous reunion. Offers for book and movie deals poured in, but Richard and Lily declined them all, preferring to keep the deepest parts of their journey private as they continued to discover who they were as father and daughter. The publicity did bring unexpected benefits, however. Other families with missing children reached out, drawing hope from their story. Richard established a foundation to help search for long-term missing children and to support those who aged out of the foster care system with nowhere to go. Lily, once she completed her education, planned to study psychology with a focus on trauma and family reunification. Their pain had been transformed into purpose, a way to ensure that other families might find the same healing they had been granted. The silver locket that had been at the center of their reunion now represented their mission to help others find their way back to each other. Richard often marveled at how his greatest loss had transformed into his life's most meaningful purpose, all because he had noticed a familiar gleam of silver on a cold winter morning when he least expected anything to change. "Sometimes I think about all the people who must pass each other on the street every day without knowing how their lives are connected," he reflected one evening as they sorted through old photographs. "How many other reunions are waiting to happen if we just pay attention to the signs around us?" Lily nodded thoughtfully, understanding now the extraordinary sequence of events that had led to their reunion. Perhaps their story could help others remain alert to those small signs of connection in their own lives. As Lily prepared to start college that fall, something she had never imagined possible during her years of poverty, she and Richard developed new traditions to replace the ones they had lost. Every Friday evening, they visited the observatory where Richard had once taken 5-year-old Emma to see the stars. Every December, they volunteered together at homeless shelters, especially attuned to the needs of single parents and their children. The trust fund Richard had established for his daughter all those years ago had continued growing, providing Lily with security she had never known, but more valuable than the financial inheritance was the emotional legacy they now shared. "Dad," she said one evening as they walked along the river, "I used to dream about you, you know. Even when I didn't understand who you were in the dreams, I somehow knew you were out there looking for me." Richard's eyes filled with tears at this confession. "I never stopped looking," he admitted. "Even when the police gave up, Even when everyone told me to move on with my life, I kept searching. I hired private investigators every few years, followed up on every possible lead." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "But I never thought to look right outside my favorite coffee shop." They both laughed at the irony, how the universe had finally brought them together in the most unexpected way. It was a reminder that sometimes the things we seek most desperately are closer than we realize, waiting for us to simply open our eyes and truly see. Their connection had withstood 12 years of separation, preserved in a little silver locket and in the unbreakable bond between father and daughter that transcended time, distance, and even deliberate separation. The hardest part of their journey was confronting the truth about Patricia. After her death, Lily had found journals that revealed the progression of her mother's paranoid delusions, how she had convinced herself that Richard was trying to erase her from their daughter's life, despite all evidence to the contrary. The psychiatrists Richard consulted confirmed what they had suspected. Severe untreated mental illness had warped Patricia's perception of reality to the point where her desperate actions had seemed, to her, the only way to protect her child. This understanding didn't erase the damage done, but it helped both Richard and Lily process their grief and anger with compassion rather than hatred. "I think forgiveness is the only way forward," Lily said thoughtfully as they sorted through old photographs together, creating a timeline of their separated years. "Not for her sake, but for ours." Richard admired the wisdom his daughter had developed through her hardships, a maturity beyond her years that sometimes made his heart ache for the carefree childhood she deserved. Yet despite everything she had endured, Lily possessed a remarkable capacity for joy and trust that Patricia had not managed to extinguish. She approached her new life with Richard with cautious optimism, gradually letting down the defensive walls she had built during years of instability. Together, they worked through their complex emotions in therapy sessions: grief for the lost years, anger at the circumstances that had separated them, fear that somehow this happiness might be taken away again. Slowly, day by day, they built a new relationship on the foundation of their old one, creating space for who they had become during their years apart. One rainy afternoon, as they sheltered in a bookstore during an unexpected downpour, Lily discovered a children's book about stars that Richard used to read to her. "I remember this," she whispered, running her fingers over the colorful illustrations. "You used to tell me that even when we couldn't see the stars through the city lights, they were still there, watching over us." Richard nodded, throat tight with emotion. "I used to look up at them every night after you disappeared," he admitted. "It made me feel connected to you somehow, thinking that wherever you were, you might be seeing the same stars." Lily leaned against her father's shoulder, taking comfort in his solid presence. "I did the same thing," she confessed. "Whenever Mom and I moved to a new place, I'd find the brightest star in the sky and pretend it was you watching over me." The anniversary of the day they found each other became their special celebration, more significant to them than any traditional holiday. On the first such anniversary, Richard presented Lily with a gift, a small velvet box containing a new charm for her silver locket. When she opened it, her breath caught at the sight of a tiny silver star set with a small diamond. "To remind you that even when we were apart, we were looking at the same stars," Richard explained softly. "And that some connections can never truly be broken." Lily added the star charm to her necklace alongside the heart, the two symbols dangling together against her collarbone, one representing the past that had led them back together, the other symbolizing the future they would build together. As they embraced, both felt the extraordinary power of destiny that had allowed them to recognize each other through time and distance, across the impossible divide that had separated them for so long. Their story spread hope like ripples across still water. 6 months after their reunion, Richard received a letter from a father in Arizona who had been inspired by their story to continue searching for his son who had disappeared 7 years earlier. Following Richard's example of revisiting places connected to his child's past, the man had found his son living just 3 states away, renamed and relocated by a non-custodial relative. 3 more similar stories followed within the year, each reunion strengthening Richard and Lily's belief that their pain had served a greater purpose. Lily started a support group for recovered missing children, creating a safe space for discussing the complex emotions of rediscovering one's identity and family. "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us create the most beautiful opportunities to help others," she told her father as they reviewed applications for their foundation's first scholarship program for foster youth. The foundation grew rapidly, becoming one of the most respected organizations dedicated to finding long-term missing children and supporting families torn apart by abduction, estrangement, or mental illness. Richard's business connections proved invaluable for fundraising. while Lily's personal experience gave the foundation an authenticity that resonated with both donors and the families they served. Together, they implemented new approaches to old problems, combining traditional search methods with social media strategies, offering mental health support alongside practical resources, creating community networks that kept missing children's cases from growing cold. Each success story validated their methods and fueled their commitment to helping others experience the same joy of reunion they had found. What had begun as a personal tragedy had blossomed into a mission that touched countless lives. Richard watched with pride as his daughter blossomed into an eloquent advocate for family reunification and mental health awareness. When Lily gave her first public speech at a national conference for missing children's organizations, he sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face as she shared their story with compassion and insight. "My journey taught me that identity isn't something fixed or fragile," she told the audience, her voice strong and clear. "It's resilient, adaptable, and can survive even the most determined efforts to erase it. The connection between parent and child exists beyond names, beyond geography, beyond time itself." After her speech, families lined up to speak with her, many clutching photos of their own missing loved ones, drawing strength from the living proof before them that miracles sometimes do happen. Her words resonated deeply with those who had been searching for years without success, offering them permission to keep hoping when logic and statistics suggested they should give up. Richard marveled at how articulately his daughter could express the complex emotions of their experience, transforming their private pain into a message of hope for others. This gift for communication was something new, not a trait he recognized from little Emma, but a skill Lily had developed during their years apart. It was a reminder that their separation, though tragic, had shaped her into someone extraordinary in ways that might never have emerged otherwise. "I'm so proud of you," he told her as they drove home from the conference. "Not just for who you were, but for who you've become." Lily smiled, understanding the distinction. Their reunion wasn't about reclaiming the past. It was about embracing the present while honoring all that had brought them to this moment. As the years passed, their extraordinary beginning evolved into a remarkable ongoing story. Richard's business empire shifted focus toward philanthropic endeavors, with Lily gradually taking on leadership roles after completing her education. Together they created programs that combined search efforts for missing children with mental health interventions for families in crisis, addressing both the symptoms and causes of family fractures. Their work saved countless other families from experiencing the pain they had endured. On quiet evenings, they still marveled at the confluence of chance and fate that had brought them together. How the simple decision to give a 5-year-old girl a silver locket had created a beacon that would eventually guide her home, despite all odds. "Some things are meant to be," Lily would say, holding the locket that now carried both the heart and the star. "Some bonds can never truly be broken." Have you ever wondered what would have happened if Richard had walked past that coffee shop without noticing? What if he'd been looking at his phone instead of seeing that silver glint catching the morning light? One moment of awareness changed everything, not just for Richard and Lily, but for countless other families who found hope and reunion through their foundation. Their story reminds us that sometimes the smallest details contain the biggest miracles, if only we're paying attention. The silver locket that once represented loss became the symbol of an unbreakable connection that transcended time, distance, and even deliberate separation. What in your life might be a silver locket, a small detail holding the key to something extraordinary? Are you paying close enough attention to recognize it when it appears? This remarkable journey from heartbreak to healing shows us the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of family bonds. What would you do if given a second chance with someone you thought was lost forever? How would you rebuild that relationship while honoring all that happened in between? Richard and Lily's story challenges us to remain open to life's unexpected miracles and to create meaning from our deepest pain. Their experience transformed not just their lives but the lives of many others facing similar situations, proving that sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest gifts to the world. If you found their story touching, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to hear more incredible tales of family, fate, and the extraordinary resilience of love. Remember, sometimes the hardest chapters of our lives are just setting the stage for the most beautiful reunions.